one little storm yesterday.
Oh, I guess that's what I saw yesterday's storm.
Yeah. In fact, it hit the south. It was a massive hailstorm that hit the south on the north side. So
Oh, okay.
we got one little downpour and then it was gone.
So I did see that it sort of hit and took off again.
Yeah. So what's happening in Melbourne?
They're getting lots of rain and they had some storms apparently.
Okay. Must be cold.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just I don't know if they're cold or not. I'm assuming they are. It's Melbourne.
What about you, Sam? How's the new puppy? How's
He's
your new
very cute. He's great. He had his first grooming this morning, so he's come back looking like a completely different dog. Oh my God, I can fall in love with you all over again. Yeah, he's very cute.
I just feel tempted to say, let me see. We've got to see this gorgeous
Well,
little
I've put him to bed. He's in his crate. He had a big morning, first groom, 2 hours with the groomer. He would have gone crazy. So he's gone into his crate for a nap.
yeah, okay. Good idea. So that mom can get some work done.
Exactly. I time his naps like I used to when my kids were newborn. Like, okay, what's the time? No, if I make sure he has eats here so he can go in his crate, I can go and do that.
And he follows those sleep times.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, he's actually really good. So when we first brought him home, he used to go crazy and he used to bite, because they're teething, so he'd
Yeah.
bite and he'd go crazy. And I realized I didn't realize at first that it was him overreacting when he got tired. So now I put him in his crate every sort of 1.5 to 2 hours. He hardly ever does that.
Wow. Gee.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. For any listeners that are listening to this, Sam's just given you 101 for puppies that chew everything. Put bed. This is commercial real estate with a little twist of puppy train.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Uh,
Amazing. Okay, so
all
on and
right.
upwards. Today we're going to be doing finding the right property, location, numbers, and strategy. So, Sam, should we dive right into it?
Let's do it because I believe that there is a bit to get through. I'm sure, lots of tips and tricks that you're going to be sharing. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Okie dokie. So in this episode, we're going to be evaluating just how to evaluate a property, make sure it's the right fit for you, looking at a property and seeing whether it's going to be giving you that long-term investment that aligns with your goals. And it's not just about any old property, it's about the right property, which at the moment is a little bit like a golden needle in the golden haystack. But hey, you
Hmm.
know, run the numbers, do what you got to do, and let's get back into that.
All right. Let's start off with a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, and I have learned over many, many years that this is a step that a lot of people, especially when they get excited, miss in sort of just about anything that they're doing, but it definitely applies to commercial real estate, and that's the importance of due diligence. I still have trouble saying that after all of these episodes. Because I think a lot of people think it sounds boring, when they get excited, they're like, oh, we'll just skip that, we'll be okay. But I know I know from speaking with you a lot that this is just so, so important. So can we start off touching on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that have been following the podcast for a while, you'll hear that the show's very big on due diligence. I'm probably go overboard on due diligence, but I think it's important. And the most important is just to make sure that you're doing your research, that you're confirming that the property that you're looking at is really in good condition, that it's solid, that it's sound, that there are no hidden legal or finance issues. And this process is really, really fundamentally important. And I always say in residential, due diligence is fairly simplistic. What you see is what you get. In commercial, there's so many nuances in
Mm,
lease with the tenants, with the building, with the neighbors, with the surroundings, so there's just so much more that you want to be looking into so that you make sure that when you purchase this property, it's not a headache.
mm. I know you have spoken about this so much more. Even though when you said if you've listened to the podcast, I thought you were about to drop me in it and say, Sam always struggles with due diligence. That's what I thought you were going to say. But you do talk about this so much, and I've learnt so much from doing these episodes with you, just how many different pieces there are on both sides of this. So definitely, I've learnt I wouldn't even try and get through this minefield on my own.
No, it is, worst case scenario, if you're going to try and buy a commercial property by yourself, if you don't want to do all the due diligence, make sure that the location is 100% correct. I mean, if you know that there's gentrification in the area, that the location is growing, I would say that could be 50% of it in commercial. However, bearing in mind that it might work in residential, in commercial, it's not your be and all of that property, because like I said, there's so many other factors as well. So with regards location, it's incredibly important that you're buying the right type of commercial property in the right type of location. And I'll give an example of that. You might go along and buy a commercial property that is being rezoned to maybe more residential. So, which means that council wants to get rid of the commercial property that's in there, and they're not going to give you any leeway if you want to build or develop something else. Or ensure that there aren't any easements that are coming over, or resumptions. With in gentrification, there are heaps and heaps of resumptions. And for those of you that don't know what resumptions are, it's when your property is in the line of where they're wanting to expand and build roads or infrastructure, and you might find out that in 5 years' time, or the minute you bought the property, you're going to knock on the door or a notice from council to say that in 5 years they're going to be resuming your property to build a easement or a freeway or whatever it is. So very important to make sure that the location really is squeaky clean and perfect for the type of tenant that you're either wanting or going to be attracting.
I always think about this as well, and I picked this up from you from another episode. If you've got an area, for example, that's a more aging population, then sort of medical office kind of real estate is probably a really good bet. Am I on the right track here?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. And often what you can do is have a look at who the people are in that area, what is happening, is it young families or is it aging families? And you can run gap analysis to find out what is required. It's quite an expensive process, quite a detailed process to do that gap analysis to find out what do they need in that area. And you hit the nail on the head there. We had a great example of this. In fact, it was one of our case studies where one of our clients purchased a property. I helped him buy this property that was previously an office and had a residential one-bedroom abode, sort of T-junction on the back of it. Long story short, he repositioned that property, and did quite a lot of capital works, turned it into a medical because that area was gentrifying. There was an aging population and they needed more medical. And there happened to be one of the larger medical companies that came along and said, whoops, we'll take that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And he quadrupled the value of his property by doing that.
Oh, awesome. Great case study.
Yeah, absolutely. So always have a look at what's happening in the area as far as position is concerned. Tenant demands, what we spoke about that in your gap analysis, what is going to give you steady income? So think about what kinds of tenants are going to give you steady income, especially if you're buying a property that the tenant's going out of. And also think about future infrastructure. Sam, there's so much going on in AI at the moment. Just today, we got issued email with regard to council upgrading electrical smart meters.
Oh, yes, I've seen them being rolled out.
Yep. So all of that is aligning itself to more and more AI. and also have a look at what infrastructures are coming in the surrounding areas. Is it close to public transport? What is the kind of community that's going to be moving in there? How can you optimize the property that you're buying by minor changes that will align with new communities, new developments, new projects?
I've got a question. Right at the beginning of, this section, you talked about have a look and see what the other real estate is doing. If you go into an area and you see a lot of empty commercial real estate, and there's definitely around me a lot of suburbs where there's pockets of a lot of empty infrastructure, is that definitely a don't go there, that's a no-go zone? Or could it mean that it has previously had the wrong type of tenants for the area? Or even is that an easy to answer question, or is that something to look into?
Interesting question, Sam, because we do believe that areas go through ebbs and tides.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess what you need to do is look at the area and say, well, has it had its peak? When it had its peak, who was in there? What is the surrounding area? What's happening in the surrounding areas? Is it surrounded by residential? In those residentials, are they young families? Is it because it's new builds? Is it because it's older homes that were built 20 years ago? And if you think about it, if homes were built 20 years ago, people in their 20s and 30s would have bought those. They're now 20 years on, they're in their 50s, heading 60. They want to downsize, they want to maybe jump into their caravan and go traveling the country. So their needs have changed. So who is going to be the new tenants that are going to be moving into those homes, and what do they need?
Yeah, okay.
What requirements do they need? Okay. A lot of shopping has now gone online, so how are those commercial properties being adjusted to the needs of the new generations coming in? And all it needs is one good operator, and I say one good operator, one good business to come in and say, oh, this is an amazing place for young, trendy cafe, laundromat, restaurant, outdoor area for kids to play. And boom. And then you find that all of the other little, retails or whatever they are around it start popping up and blossoming as a result of just one good idea, one good operator going in there.
Yeah, I love it.
Industrial. Are yours industrial or are they retail?
No. So the two areas that I'm thinking of that first came to mind were what I like, the old strip shops.
Ah, yes. Okay, classic. That is a perfect example for if anybody's looking for a buying opportunity, guys, Sam's just mentioned it. Because that's what we go hunting for. So we look for the retail strip of shops. And we look at them, we have a look at who we can bring in there, how we can change that up, and everything that I've just mentioned. So that is a perfect opportunity. It's a perfect buying opportunity with the right smart thinking behind it.
I love it. I'm so glad I asked that now. Let's talk about the numbers.
You're going to have 1,000 people phoning and you're asking where you live.
Yeah, where do you live? All right, you and I chat when we're offline.
Okay, guys. Sam's holding that one close to her chest.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about the numbers because I know that it can get complicated, but obviously if you're talking about investing, this is where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
So what do you need to make sure works before you sign off on a commercial property?
All right. Well, first things first, the first thing that we have a look at is it gross or is it net? Okay. Now, often sellers themselves wouldn't know if their leases, their tenants are on a gross or a net lease, depending on who and what level of investment type buyer or seller you're buying from. They'll say to you, oh yeah, they pay a portion of this or a portion of that. Yes, it's a net lease. Well, no, actually it's not. It might be a part net lease or a part gross lease. So you really need to go through that lease, squeeze those numbers, have a look at the invoices that the seller, this is a little bit of a hot tip here, that the owner has been sending to the tenants individually, and articulate what the tenants are paying for versus what you are paying for. So you really want to break that all down, then put it into huge spreadsheets and have a look at what your total expenses are versus what your absolute net income is. And everything in between is in your I don't know bucket. You put that into your gross, because that means that 9 times out of 10 you're going to be paying for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you really want to know that if you're buying a property, if it's tenanted. Don't forget to include your taxes, insurance, maintenance, add budgets in for all of that, because that's, if they are gross leases, all of that comes out of your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
This is why in commercial we love net leases where the tenant pays for everything. Okay, so we try and get those. In retail, not always the case. In large format retail, you will see that because you're dealing with a sophisticated business. In small retail, generally, not really, because, small retails are your mom and pops that are used to paying rent on a monthly basis or weekly basis. So it's a little bit more tricky. So depending on what asset you're buying, but even when you're purchasing a high value asset, even more important to ensure that all your outgoings, and with high value assets, you've got a different set of criteria of due diligence that you want to go and have a look into. Things like window cleaning, lift services, escalators if you have them, various different types of things. Okay. So it really is very property dependent on what kind of asset you're buying.
And is this something that you help people with, or is this like an accountant or a broker that you need to be speaking with? Who do you get to help like really break down these numbers?
Look, we generally have a deep dive onto the leases. And the most important thing on the lease is to look at it's all about the money. As far as I'm concerned, when you're looking at a lease, you've got to think to yourself, why do you have a lease? A lease is an agreement that me, Mrs. Owner, is in agreement to pay for 20% of your Mr. Tenant's outgoings. Okay. In other words, in our lease, it says you pay 80%, I'll pay 20%. That's an agreement. Or Mr. Tenant, you pay everything, including land tax, including management fees, including maintenance, including garden cleaning, recreation, that sort of stuff. So it really is dependent. Every single lease is different. So what exactly is the lease? When you're purchasing that property, you're actually purchasing a lease. And what does that lease say? So it's all about the legal aspect of it. And that's why it's very, very important that you have a really good legal team to make sure that you know what you're purchasing.
Yeah. On that, so diving into the leases, is that something that if you took over the building, like you bought the building and the tenant changed over at the same time, can you change the lease? Like once the lease is sort of in place, is that in place forever kind of thing?
That's a really interesting question, Sam. And the short answer is you don't want to. Okay, and we've had this a couple of times as well, where we've purchased a building. It has a tenant in it, and then 6 months later, the tenant has sold to another business. The other business comes in. They are legally bound to the lease that you currently have. Now, here's the most important thing, okay? You should in the lease have that the tenant has an obligation, the outgoing tenant, the selling tenant has an obligation to tell you that they're selling the business. And the reason for that is when they sell the business, if the business is not attached to that lease, and 9 times out of 10, it might be the same business name, but the entity behind it is different. Okay, so just think about it, that if you're buying a business, you don't want to buy somebody else's debt.
Mm-hmm.
You buy their business, but you would bring your own entity into it. Okay. So the most important thing, and the reason why you need to know that is because you need to change, you need to do an amendment to the lease to reflect the new owner of the new business.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, your lease becomes null and void
Mm-hmm.
because you still effectively legally the outgoing tenant, you're in contract to the outgoing tenant. So it's something that is often missed, very, very important, and it's cheap to do an amendment to a lease.
Mm-hmm.
So it's well worth doing it. And 9 times out of 10, it should be at the incoming tenant's expense. So make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Make
So
sure
many,
you
so
put
many dots and crosses to be looking at.
you can
Let's.
see, I mean, commercials all about it's all about legal agreements.
Mm-hmm.
That's what complicates commercial.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the tenants a little bit further because when you're buying a commercial property, the tenant stability, like you're not just buying the building, you're buying that stability because you're buying an income stream. So obviously you want strong tenants, stable tenants. This is something that back in the day and I've never asked you this because this happens like 30 years ago. We were told by our bank to never touch commercial property because it's so much harder because if a tenant leaves, it's vacant for so much longer than residential. So talk to me about tenant stability.
Okay. So when you're doing your due diligence, you can always ask to see their financial stability, their financial books.
Oh, wow.
You can. However, they are not obligated to show
Mm-hmm.
you. So the only thing that you really have from the vendor is history to have a look at a reflection of what their tenancy schedule has looked like over the last year to 2 years. So you can ask for their tenancy schedule, and generally that would reflect that they've been paying on time or that they've been late or whatever it is. If you see that they've been paying on time and every single thing is like clockwork, boom, 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 you shouldn't have a problem. If you see a couple of gaps late, you want to question why, what was going on. Also, depending on the type of tenant, because if you're dealing with a high value tenant on a triple net income, triple net lease, generally those tenants are backed by big companies that your payments just go into a system and they just get paid. However, there are a lot of companies at the moment that are downscaling. There are a lot of companies that are busy changing their strategies, that are going more offline. I was just speaking to somebody in the know I do a lot of cycling, so I'm very interested in cycling and what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the bicycle brands, are actually selling off and downscaling their branches because they're finding that their competitors are doing more and more online. So
Mm-hmm.
they're wanting to get the best of both markets. They've already got the branches, and instead of having more branches in more locations, they're thinking, well, maybe they'll just have one main branch and the rest of the time they'll do online for,
Mm.
you know,
Makes sense, right?
yeah, yeah. So it's really important to, I always say the three most important things to do when purchasing a property is interview the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
First thing. Second thing, speak to the tenant. Third thing, have conversation with the tenant and find out what's happening.
And fourth and fifth thing.
Definitely. If you're speaking to the branch manager, you're not really getting to the nuts and bolts of what's happening in the business. The branch manager is
Mm.
going to tell you about that. But you're
Yeah.
really wanting to get through the branch manager and go to the owners, to the managers, if it's a national company, to the asset managers to find out what the strategies are, what are their future plans for the business, for that branch in particular. if you're coming up for a lease renewal, because often what happens is people keep their properties until maybe 3-4 years before they go through a lease renewal. And it might be because they know that, let's say it's a large format retail or an industrial property, and they know that their tenant is going to be resizing, rescaling, maybe moving into bigger premises or downscaling into smaller premises. So they would sell the property with 3 years tenancy on it. But if you're not doing your homework, you could find out in 3 years' time that actually your tenant's moving out.
Mm.
You know, and as you said earlier, yes, in commercial, traditionally, the biggest risk with commercial is that you sit on vacancies for longer. But if you're having these conversations earlier, you could be mitigating that risk. I've got a great story about that, case study.
Let's hear it.
I assisted one of my clients to purchase a property, and through these conversations with the actual owner of the business, the owner said, well, actually, they're going to be moving out in 2 years' time. So that's 2 years. That's 24 months. It's quite a long time up ahead. And we got chatting with him. He said, yep, he's bought his own land and he's building his own shed, and it's a far bigger, they're moving into a bigger space. They're expanding, all of that. And the more we went through the conversation, the more we found out from him, the more we could work with him. And he was in agreement that we could start marketing the property 12 months before he moved out. Long story short, he has been slowly moving out of the property. And at the time at which he has to be out completely, we have managed to find another tenant to move in.
Perfect.
So it's been a 12-month marketing campaign, working with agents, working diligently on it, new people coming in, and they're coming in at the same rate or similar rate. So that is the value of being friendly, working with your tenant, working with the company, whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, love that. Now, Mish, you did cover quite early in this episode a little bit, or you touched on slightly zoning and planning. I think that you should touch on this a little bit more, because I think that this is really something important. What can you tell us about what we need to know about zoning and planning, the changes that could happen, and how it could impact value or demand?
Yeah, we did touch on it, but Sam, as we speak about it, I'm just thinking we haven't actually spoken about zoning per se. Often what we do, depending on the type of property, we would speak to a town planner, okay? And you want to find out what zoning in particular the property is that you're purchasing, because there might be restrictions on the zoning. For instance, we bought a property a couple of years ago, an industrial property, and it was zoned specifically for glass and aluminium steelworks. And that is what it was approved for, which made it a little bit difficult, but we had to go through a change of use. Now, a change of use costs a little bit of money. We were very fortunate. We had a national tenant that went in there, and they were prepared to pay for it. But I mean, it could be anything up to about 20,000, you know, depending on the size of the business and the size of the tenancy. So very important to have a look at that, have a look at what your zoning is, have a look at what your usage is, have a look at how general is that usage, that you could put various different types of businesses in there.
Wow, there has been a lot about numbers and data and all of the really important things that we need to know. And I know that there's so many moving parts, and it's a lot to take in. So if you really want to take the guesswork out of this, Mish, how can you help people?
Look, the best thing is to go to our website, jump on there. We've got heaps and heaps of free information. There's blogs, there's the podcast, YouTube links. We have a short questionnaire, 8 questions to get you closer to where you want to get. Book a call, you know, have a session with us. Book a call, find out whether you qualify for a commercial property, if that's what you're looking for. Or maybe you're further on in your commercial journey and you're looking for something bigger, better, shinier. Best thing is we still have the VIP lists, which is around about 20 properties that we put out every single month. So jump on there, become a member, get that free of charge. There's loads of freebies on the website. Go and click away and have some fun.
I love it. So there is so much to know when it comes to finding the right property. It's more than just, getting excited and ticking the box of I found something. It's, due diligence, understanding the location, the lease, the tenant stability, the zoning and planning. So if you do it right, you're going to be building a portfolio of long-term profitable assets. So that's so important. Mish, what are we going to be talking about in the next episode?
Okay, Sam, this is something that really fires my motors, and that is
Sorry, you say the things that make me laugh. Wow, let's get our motors fired up.
let's rest those motors. Of course, you're a car girl. You'll really relate to that, hey?
Exactly.
So I really love growth, and I think most people out there would always want to be adding value. So we're going to delve into how to scale your portfolio. Once you've bought your first commercial property, let's look at the goals on how to build it and to grow it. Talk about strategic sort of properties that are going to add to your portfolio, that start generating passive income and possibly replace your general income, your active income. So yeah, stay tuned. This is a series that we're going to be doing, and I'm super grateful to have Sam picking my brain on these, because Sam, you're really making the old grey matter go into.
I love hanging out with you on the podcast. The next episode sounds fabulous. So thanks for listening. Stay tuned, and we will catch you next episode.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Sam.